uh, Virgo. Picture this. Um, Two people, a history between them that never fully closed, and somewhere in the background, a third presence, watching, unsettled, quietly aware that the ground beneath this situation is beginning to shift in a direction they cannot control. You may know exactly what this feels like, or you may be only beginning to sense the edges of it, that strange, low frequency hum of something unresolved that refuses to stay buried no matter how much time passes, no matter how many distractions are layered on top of it. This reflection is for the people who have felt that hum, who have noticed it growing louder recently, even when nothing on the surface seems to have changed. Let's start where most people are afraid to start, with the truth that some connections do not end, they only go underground. Whew. There is a particular kind of bond that defies the ordinary logic of closure. You can walk away from it. You can build new routines around its absence. You can convince yourself for stretches of days or even weeks that you have moved past it entirely. And then, without warning, without invitation, it surfaces again. In a dream, you wake from slowly, in a song that finds you in a public place at exactly the wrong moment, in a sudden, inexplicable certainty that something, somewhere, is in motion. Some people dismiss these moments as nostalgia, as the mind doing what minds do, reaching for the familiar when the present feels uncertain. And perhaps sometimes that is all it is. But sometimes it is something else. Sometimes it is the quiet signal of a situation that has not finished unfolding, a story that both people, whether they have acknowledged it or not, are still writing from their separate distances. Now, here is where this becomes layered, because this is not simply a story about two people. There is a third presence in this dynamic, and that presence is not neutral. Think about what it means to be the person standing between two people whose connection refuses to fully dissolve. Think about the particular kind of discomfort that comes with sensing, even without proof, even without anything you could put into words, that something between them remains alive in a way that your presence has never quite been able to extinguish. It is an uncomfortable position, and people who find themselves in it often respond in ways that are worth observing carefully. Some become louder, more demanding of attention, of reassurance, of proof that they are chosen. They tighten their grip precisely because some instinct in them recognizes that the ground they are standing on is less stable than it appears. They may not even be fully conscious of why they are doing this. The behavior is driven not by logic, but by something older and more primal, the deep human fear of being displaced. Others become quieter, more watchful. They begin to create distance not because they want to leave, but because some part of them is preparing for a reality they are not yet ready to name. They become harder to read, more guarded, more careful about what they reveal and what they conceal. Either way, and this is the important observation, their energy shifts. And if you have been paying attention to the atmosphere around a particular situation in your life recently, you may have already noticed something like this, a change in behavior that seemed to arrive from nowhere, a tension that didn't exist before, or that existed quietly and has recently become impossible to ignore. That tension is information. It is worth sitting with. Let's talk about the person reaching back, because that is in many ways the center of this entire reflection. There is something that happens inside a person when they begin to reckon honestly with a connection they walked away from or were pulled away from before it had reached its natural conclusion. It is not always a comfortable reckoning. In fact, for many people, it begins as resistance, as a determined effort to not feel what they are feeling, to not acknowledge what they are beginning to quietly understand. They throw themselves into other things, into other people sometimes, into routines and responsibilities, and anything that keeps the mind occupied and the heart at a manageable distance from what it actually wants. But here is the thing about genuine feeling, the kind that is rooted in something real rather than something convenient. It does not respond well to being ignored. It has a patience that outlasts distraction. It waits. And it surfaces again and again in the unguarded moments, the moments between sleep and waking, the moments in the middle of an ordinary afternoon when everything goes quiet and the mind finally stops performing and simply feels. In those moments, some people experience a clarity that surprises them with its certainty. Not a dramatic revelation, nothing cinematic, just a quiet, steady recognition, almost like remembering something they always knew but had temporarily set aside, that there is unfinished business, that something was left incomplete, that the story they told themselves about why things ended or why things had to stay as they are may not be the whole truth. And from that recognition, something begins to move, slowly at first, carefully, with the particular caution of a person who has been hurt before and is not interested in being careless with something that matters. But it moves. Now, here is the part of this reflection that requires the most honesty. Reunion, in whatever form it takes, whether dramatic or quiet, whether sudden or gradual, is never simply a return to what was. This is something that many people do not fully consider when they feel the pull of a connection reasserting itself. They imagine, sometimes without realizing they are imagining it, that going back means recovering what existed before, the same dynamic, the same feeling, the same version of both people occupying the same emotional space they once shared. But both people have changed. Time does that, regardless of whether we ask it to. Experiences accumulate, perspectives shift. The person reaching back toward you is not identical to the person who was once simply beside you, and neither are you. Uh, and this is not a discouraging observation. If anything, it is an interesting one, because it means that what may be reassembling itself is not a replica of something old. It is something new, built from the materials of a shared history, but shaped by everything that has happened since. Something that carries the depth of what was, combined with the growth of what both people have become in the space between. That kind of connection, if it finds its way back to itself, tends to have a different quality than it did the first time. Less innocent, perhaps, but more conscious, more chosen, more aware of its own value in a way that only absence and time can teach. Let's return to the third party for a moment, because their role in this dynamic is not simply that of an obstacle. It is worth considering what their presence in this situation actually represents, not just for the people involved, but as a mirror for something deeper. When a person positions themselves between two people whose connection has not dissolved, they are often, whether consciously or not, responding to something they sense rather than something they know. An instinct, a reading of the emotional atmosphere that their logical mind may be doing its best to override. And that instinct, however uncomfortable it may be making things, is not entirely wrong. Something is in motion. Something is changing. The energy of this situation has shifted in ways that are difficult to articulate but impossible to ignore for anyone who is paying close attention. The resistance of the third party, the unhappiness, the tension, the behavior that may seem disproportionate or difficult to explain can sometimes be understood as a kind of confirmation, not a pleasant one, not one that anyone would choose, but a confirmation nonetheless that something real and significant is happening beneath the surface of what appears ordinary. People do not tend to fight shadows. They fight things that feel real to them, things that feel like genuine threats to what they have built or what they want to preserve. And the intensity of someone's reaction to a situation is often, not always, but often proportional to how much that situation actually matters. Pay attention to where the resistance is loudest. It tends to point with surprising accuracy toward where the most significant energy is concentrated. Here is something to carry with you as this reflection closes. You may be in the middle of something right now that does not yet have a clear shape, a situation that feels unresolved, layered, complicated by presences and histories and feelings that don't arrange themselves neatly into categories of past and present, finished and unfinished. That complexity is not a problem to be solved. It is the texture of something real. Simple things do not tend to create this kind of atmospheric charge, this particular combination of quiet anticipation and background tension that some people may recognize very clearly in their own lives right now. Simple things resolve cleanly or they dissolve quietly. They do not linger in this particular way. They do not generate this kind of ripple in the people surrounding them. What lingers like this, what refuses to fully close, what generates resistance in the people close enough to feel its pull, that tends to be the kind of thing that carries genuine weight. And genuine weight in matters of human connection is something worth handling with both care and honesty, not rushing toward, not running from, but meeting with the kind of clear-eyed presence that real situations deserve. Whatever is moving in the direction of your life right now, whoever is quietly, carefully, perhaps nervously beginning to find their way back toward something they recognize as significant. The most important thing may not be to predict what happens next. It may simply be to notice, to remain open to what the next chapter of this story wants to become without forcing it into the shape of what came before or the shape of what fear insists it must be. Because sometimes the most unexpected developments in a person's life are not the ones that arrive loudly and announce themselves. They are the ones that have been quietly assembling themselves in the background for longer than anyone realized, until one day the silence breaks and everything that was waiting finally steps into the light. And by then, it may feel less like a surprise and more like something you always, somewhere beneath the noise of ordinary life, knew was coming.